when one contrasts that, now February and March are your dry months, traditionally. When one contrasts that against your 30-year average, looking at the 1971 to 2000 mean average, you understand that, yes, it is your driest months, February and March, but it wouldn't have had the sort of all-island dryness that would have been expressed. Now, something that I was speaking to a farmer in the room about earlier is the standard precipitation index, and it's monitored, and it shows the moisture that would have, the moisture measures that we would have looked at between January to February. So it shows the significant impact in the West, in particular Westmoreland into the Negril area. Mr. President, the projections from the Met Service and validated by the Caribbean Meteorological Organization shows the rainfall outlook for April, May, and June for colleagues to take note of. Now, whereas we expect to come out of severe drought conditions over the next 2 months, you will notice that the projections show Western Jamaica to continue facing severe drought or to facing reduced rainfall. Now, this is obviously cause for concern. Mr. President, this has affected some 64 systems island-wide for the National Water Commission, with 47 of those systems coming in the west, in the east rather, and 17 systems being affected in the Western Division, in particular Hanover and Westmoreland, as we would have mentioned. And just for the purpose of the Hansard, just to note that the Logwood treatment plant is running at 50%, the New Mills treatment plant and the Kendall systems are running at 65 and 50% respectively, and Bulstrode is down by about 20% in Westmoreland. This has created a debilitating effect on systems in that area. Now, the nature of the problem, we believe, and as I run through this, just lists for those colleagues who wish to see it by parish. So, for instance, I know Senator Morris would be interested in the fact that the Ita Barrel system, as we would have seen, is actually bone dry. That spring has run totally dry. So it is actually the well that we're actually pulling on supplies from to give that area. So you're seeing significant impact nationally, and obviously this will be circulated to colleagues just for review. Now, what this situation requires, Mr. President, is an intervention by way of additional trucking to communities that are are affected, but certainly larger interventions where there is greater impact. Mr. President, the allocations that we have made to facilitate this emergency intervention is 150 million Jamaican dollars that will be channeled into trucking. There are 13 seats that are assessed to not be affected in the way that others, constituencies, that are not affected by the chronic drought. These are largely the plains of Kingston and St. Andrew and the plains of St. Catherine. So we all know where those constituencies would be. So 50 constituencies will be allocated a base figure of $1.5 million to facilitate trucking through the usual mechanisms. We have made additional allocations to the members of Parliament in Clarendon, in St. Elizabeth, Westmoreland, Hanover, and St. Ann Northwest because of a major system failure in Brownstown. No, Northeast has no such allocation. Northeast St. Ann doesn't require that allocation. However, Mr. President, we've also made allocations to the municipalities in the municipal corporations in Clarendon of $5 million to supplement their additional work, St. Elizabeth of $5 million, Westmoreland for $5 million, and in Hanover $7.5 million, and $7.5 million in the municipal corporation of St. Ann. So, President, this funding we know doesn't solve every single problem when you contemplate what trucking is and isn't as a fulsome response, but we believe it does give members of Parliament, the municipalities in areas that are predominantly affected, the ability to respond to critical infrastructure needs, as well as citizens that are particularly vulnerable from water scarcity, Mr. President. We expect, which is why I showed the projections before that this will need to last approximately 4 weeks. So if we do need to make further interventions, we absolutely will. I want to also note that there is an intervention taking place through RADA and NIC, which I will not go into today, for our farmers, especially in the worst affected areas in the West. There's also a $100 million trucking program which exists in the Ministry of Local Government, which continues to serve communities that are outside of the utility footprint. But Mr. President, trucking is the absolute worst, most inefficient, expensive way to distribute water. It is the short, medium, and long-term infrastructural investments that will make this country water resilient. And Mr. President, it is why this government has focused on these projects. For the benefit of colleagues, though I have shared similar maps before, doesn't matter, you can hear it again. You've spread the misinformation regularly. We have to spread the correct information regularly. Mr. President, you will notice a significant geographic spread of projects. You will notice the significant spread geographically of projects that shows no political favor with how we are investing the people's money, Mr. President. Now, I will not spend the time to go through every single infrastructure project, but this list will also be made to colleagues. Well, the 1.5 hours reflects the volume of money and the heavy investment and the focus this government is indeed putting into the water sector. I hear you. I soon come to you. Now, Mr. President, there are some major projects that the country should be aware of, because these are the projects that make you significantly more resilient. The first is Rio Cobre, the water treatment plant in Content St. Catherine. Now, why is this project that important? We would all recall the several statements that would have come between February of last year up to this point on our water resilience. We should note that this project, when complete, will pump 15.5 million imperial gallons into the network that supplies Spanish Town, Portmore, and Kingston once complete. Now, why is that important? What does that figure contextually mean? Well, last year, in February, in the worst of our worst drought, we were short 12 million gallons. This intervention will all but fix the source issues in that regard. But we also need to contemplate, Mr. President, what I would say pre-NRW and post-NRW. This chamber should be aware and should recall that a project started in 2015 called the Non-Revenue Water Project for Kingston and St. Andrew saw significant work done over the last 8 to 9 years on the distribution mains, the storage, and the pressure monitors throughout Kingston and St. Andrew, and indeed throughout Portmore. In 2015, Kingston and St. Andrew required 55 million gallons daily to service its needs. In 2024, Kingston and St. Andrew requires 38 million gallons daily, despite growth in population and increased commercial activity. That's the volume of leakage that we have cut with the non-revenue water project. So you are more resilient just by fixing the distribution network. 55 million gallons daily, down to 38 million gallons from conservation and from cutting leaks. So that's the import. So let's not have... I did acknowledge that the project started in 2015. But I will go to a part of Bobby's legacy shortly. Sorry? There's never been a lack of non-revenue water intention. There's never been this volume of non-revenue water investment and commitment and actual volume of projects. The reality is the programs we have made this country more water resilient. But I want to touch on the issue of rural water. There are two things this chamber must be aware of. Is that the largest investment made in rural water in a single year previous to this year was in excess of 800 million. I believe it was in 2017 by this government. This year, we've allocated 1.6 billion Jamaican dollars to the Rural Water Supply Limited, doubling the largest previous investment to ensure that we're able to invest in rural systems. Well, Mr. President, there are long-standing projects that have not happened, which I'm happy to report are now on the cusp of being a reality. And for all of those of us who are either residents or have family members in rural Jamaica, these will mean something to all of us. The Agwater Vale and Jordan Run scheme in southeast St. Mary, the Mason Hall scheme in western St. Mary, Albert Town and Ulster Spring in southern Trelawney, the Union and Balaclava scheme in northeast St. Elizabeth, the Port Morant and Eric Castle scheme in eastern St. Thomas, and the Green Park in Higginstown and Bamboo scheme in southeast and southwest St. Ann. These projects will see in excess of $36 million invested over the next 3 years and will start this year, Mr. President. We're happy to report that the project unit is being set up now and we're going to procurement shortly. Mr. President, that is in the budget space. So our legacy in rural water will be ensuring that the utility footprint of the utility in Jamaica, whether through municipal systems or NWC, goes in excess of 90%. We will ensure, Mr. President, that though we've already done work to improve water service delivery and utility reliability for over 300,000 Jamaicans over the last 2 years, Mr. President, that we expect that number to go upward of 800,000 over the next 2 years, Mr. President. But that brings me to some things that I've seen circulating on WhatsApp and all over the place around the rapid response system, Mr. President. And I saw a video that showed some old trucks that were bought by former Minister Blythe. Firstly, if they were bought by former Minister Blythe, you wouldn't expect them to still be alive today. That's the first contemplation. The next issue, and what Jamaicans should be aware of, is that those trucks, and should remember, because, you know, memories are short, right? Person should remember that we got all of a year out of those trucks because they were not fit for purpose for Jamaica's terrain. The gearboxes did not work. That the government even explored legal action in trying to recover the funds because of that. So sharing something that collapsed under a former PNP administration and trying to put it on this administration is quite something. Now, we also need to remember, and allow me to bring this up, the project was not, because you can't call it a good system, it was a disaster. The rapid response system was a disaster. But it was also fraught with audit challenges and several corruption allegations, Mr. President. And it was shut down by this administration to cut off a ridiculous feeding tree for the former administration's political activists. Mr. President, that program was cut off by this administration because it presided over significant leakage, and we're not taking back. We're not taking it back. That's a fact, Mr. President. Mr. President, this administration transferred the assets to the Ministry of Local Government, so the assets are in use for service delivery of the Jamaican people without any governance issues. We have also continued to invest on a monthly basis, rather not just on a monthly basis, on an annual basis. Last year we bought 8 additional trucks for the National Water Commission. This year we're in procurement right now for 8 additional trucks, and we will buy another 8 next year. And if we continue needing space, we will build in that emergency response, Mr. President. But make no bones about it, and the people watching at home must know that those trucks were from a failed PNP investment, and it also hurt Jamaica's water delivery systems because a lot of the money was wasted, Mr. President. And we're not going to pull back our resolve from that fact. It is a legacy of failure. So this commitment to return to that failure is a commitment to return to a corrupt, failing system, Mr. President. The other issue that I'm going to speak to briefly, Mr. President, is the Western Water, the North Coast Water Supply Improvement Scheme that we are working on. Now, you will note that it is an integrated project. The project contemplates water storage, transmission mains, upgrade of water treatment plants, and significant investment. What you're looking at here is $209 million of engineering solutions to make sure that from St. Anne all the way around to Westmoreland, there are significant upgrades of the existing infrastructure. But because you're going through a particular climatic event in Westmoreland, I think it's important for people to understand exactly what we're doing in this area and where we are. Now, to contemplate Westmoreland's water, you have to think as far away as the Martha Brae. Because what happens is that the Great River, because in Great River serves a lot of Western St. James. Because majority of your water coming from Martha Brae is like pouring water into a grater. It just pours out. That line is significantly degraded. It is also not the size that you require for a growing St. James. It is why later this year we will start construction to put in a 36-inch ductile iron main from the Martha Brae into St. James, reducing pressure in Western St. James from the systems that are in Hanover, which also support St. James. We will also upgrade the Terminal Reservoir and the Appleton Hall Reservoir in St. James, which will take the pressure off of the Great River system. But, Mr. President, we are also doing the engineering assessments and drawings now for the Great River upgrade system, because that treatment plant is particularly old. We're also doing the scoping for the Flint River Reservoir in Hanover, and we're also looking at the system that would have been commissioned by then P.J. Patterson, I believe in 2001 or 2002, at the Logwood Water Treatment Plant, which has outlived its time. It's now due for upgrade. It's an old system. A 20-year-old water treatment plant requires upgrades. So we are doing those designs. But, Mr. President, we've also looked very carefully at what is required. And the first major investment on the treatment capacity will be on the Roaring River plant, and we're also doing the Hartford tank to upgrade it to a 1.5 million gallon system, and we're looking at the Westland Mountains tank, etc. Well, Mr. President, the major line that goes into the grill comes from about Rossies. That line is 9 inches and leaks profusely. There is no way 9 inches of pipe can carry the volume of water that you require in that part of the country. So if you look at, they're doing reverse osmosis, so they won't have an impact in that space. That's not the particular challenge that you have with them. But 9 inches cannot carry your existing commercial activity or what you hope to continue to see by way of growth with housing and hotel stock along that corridor. So we will upgrade that line to a 24-inch ductile iron pipe. That project will be grouped this year. We're breaking ground this year. Okay, we're in the final stages of what we're working on with that. That will happen this year. Now, those two pipelines will be $70 million investment into the people of Westmoreland and Hanover and St. James. It will take 2 years of construction, because ultimately those pipes aren't also on a shelf. So you order the pipes and then they come in, but you have to do some of the engineering work. But this is the largest investment into Western water resilience in a very, very long time, Mr. President. So I say that to give residents the comfort that we are thinking in a very holistic manner. There's an integrated, well-thought-out plan, and that is why I've met with citizens at Logwood. That is why just last week I was at the McGrill All-Age School on the West End meeting with citizens. That is why the week before I was in Lucy meeting with citizens. We have been meeting with them and facing them with the water concerns. It is also why I quite like the West. Quite like the West. I quite like all of Jamaica, in fact. But, Mr. President, you know, I soon come to the politics. But, Mr. President, so you like to throw a stone and then when it comes back to you, you don't like it. Mr. President, we also, in March, because we recognize the impact of the Logwood system and other systems going as far as Bulls Road in Westmoreland, we had allocated to the National Water Commission an additional $30 million to facilitate emergency response in Westmoreland and Hanover. And that is why the teams have been working 24 hours a day on shift to ensure that citizens are indeed protected, are indeed serviced with water. Any assertion to the contrary is false. It is political mischief and it must be rejected, Mr. President. But, Mr. President, I turn to one other large-scale investment that we are making, and that is the greater Mandeville water supply. Former Chairman Hill, I'm sure you're very familiar with this particular scheme. Now, Mr. President, when you hear the greater Mandeville water supply system, there is an assumption that it is an investment solely in Mandeville. It's just the name of the project. Communities from as far as Pepper in St. Elizabeth have already benefited from increased distribution investment. Mr. President, it benefits this project, and this investment benefits New Green to the north, and Spurtree and Eglinton, and not Patrick, Georges Valley, Mayfair, and Old England to the east. Hopeton to Waltham is getting a 16-inch pipe, which is now completely laid and is being pressure tested as we speak. Greenvale to Kingsland is now advanced, and the contractor has been selected and is about to start the work. A new 24-inch pipeline is to be undertaken and drilled from the old Pepper site going all the way up to Gutters, Mr. President. Now, the source is being completed. We're doing the well work at Pepper. But we need to understand the areas that are benefiting. When then Chairman Hill and then Minister Hill signed off on these projects, he did it to benefit the communities of Downs, Knockpatrick, Newport, Hopeton, Greenvale, Waltham, Mandeville, Pepper itself, New Green, Brumalia, Marshall Pen. It also was signed off and scoped to benefit communities like Greenvale to Kingsland, certainly not a constituency represented by anyone on our side. It also was signed off to ensure that the Hopeton to Waltham line benefits several areas. It involves, Mr. President, a full project estimate of just over $3 billion. We have $2.5 billion of contracts in place. So this work is well advanced and is happening. But, Mr. President, we expect that major work to be complete by 2025. Now I turn to a series of comments that I heard and saw on video on my way here from another former chairman of the NWC in opposition leader of the Senate. Comments made from a community of Redberry. That community has 55% coverage in terms of pipe coverage and water supply. Mr. President, the designs are done to do the following 45%. But in all the discussions of the water frustration, former chairman who should know, that area has a particularly, one of the highest areas actually in parish of theft. And that has actually derailed the project twice before, even predating it, in terms of breakage of the system and constant repairs. So the money goes into repairs when you've done the scoping for the project. The former Minister of National Security didn't encourage in that video anyone to sign up with the Water Commission and pay their bills and to report theft where they saw it. He also didn't discourage residents from blocking a national highway, as a former Minister of National Security, over water that is being impacted by theft in that space. I was particularly disappointed when I saw the video, Mr. President. The other interesting thing about an area called Redberry. No, you can wait till you speak. Wait till you speak. Wait till you speak. Another interesting thing about Redberry is that the road, though not my area, the road complaint, Mr. President, is about a municipal road. The last time I checked, that municipality has been led by that side for a prolonged period and nothing has been done to the road. The full estimate of road work in that area is a funny number. It's approximately $400 million. So if they hadn't facilitated, rather, if they hadn't had theft at the municipal council of $400 million, they could have fixed all the roads for the people in Redberry. But however, Mr. President, this notion that no one has visited, former Minister Warmington visited the community.
1 minute, Senator Samuda. Point of order raised by Senator Brown.
That when statements, especially a long statement like this is being made, it is circulated to the opposition, so we are able to deal with it. Let me
I am
finish.
supposed to rule on it, Senator Golden Campbell, not you. You'd have to stand up behind Sister Sinclair, I tell you that.
And the minister
Yes.
has not paid us the courtesy
Okay, thank you.
of sharing this
So
statement.
you understand that
So
he's
could
not...
I ask that it be
You
provided
understand
to us?
that it's not a... He's not... hasn't paid the courtesy, so it's not really a standing...
It is well, I certainly
it's
think
not a point of order.
it's not a point of order.
No. So we
It's just
can-
a point of discourtesy.
There
Thank
go.
you,
We can
sir.
move on. Go ahead, Senator. You hear that?
No, man, next time we'll circulate. Apologies. But moving on. Mr. President, it's important to note that the first phase of upgrades to that roadway will be undertaken at approximately $100 million, and we expect the tender to be published next week as per previous commitment by the Member of Parliament after commitment and allocation made by former Minister Warmington. So, you know, sometimes in politics you call for something you already know is going to happen to give the impression to citizens that you had some role in this. But the water in the area, I left the team this morning looking at the list of projects and capital works for that area over the last 30 years to see if we could find any works in this area, because this problem has been a prolonged one. If the former chairman of NWC had ever signed off any works for South Manchester. I know this former chairman had, but I'm not saying he never do it. I'm just saying I don't find any yet. So if you signed off any capital works for South Manchester, as chairman, I would love to see them, to see what was the benefit of that, because I don't know of any. Mr. President, the issue of drought is a complex one. It is exacerbated by the chronic disinvestment in our water infrastructure over the last 40 years. But this government is taking the issue seriously. The government takes the impact on our people very serious, and it weighs on us. It is why we're making the emergency allocations. But it is why, President, we're not shy about the major capital works that we're investing in, because as has happened in Kingston, we expect the country to be.
So you soon finish?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because it's 1:20, so I'm going to ask that the minister just take the...
Mr. President, the time being 1:20, might the Senate be permitted to continue beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day?
Members have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Minister Samuda.
Mr. President, we're investing in Western water resilience. We are doing the technical work to look at the expansion and replacement of the Hermitage dam wall, a dam that is 95 years old, 45 years past its design expectation. We are also doing the design work on the Mona Reservoir for its expansion as a part of the Mahogany Vale system designed some 100 years ago, Mr. President. We are ensuring that we are making interventions this year for those who are most vulnerable and living in water-scarce areas by way of distribution of 10,000 black tanks. Colleagues should also recall that we are midway in installing 3,000 water harvesting systems in 14 constituencies, which were predominantly on the east and worst affected last year in our worst drought, complementary because of the support of the IDB. So, President, we're making these critical national investments to counter the disinvestment made in our water sector over the 40-year period. Now, I will not sit back and allow misinformation to prevail, to lead citizens to any view that is not consistent with what is being done within the water sector, Mr. President. I can safely say, and without fear of rebuke, there has been no political interference in the distribution of projects. We have ensured that citizens, as you see from the map, which is why I showed it, right across the length and breadth of this country, 300,000 of them have benefited from our water work, Mr. President. But we are also not going back to the nonsensical wastage that existed in the past. We're investing in giving people pipe water in their house, Mr. President, not buying trucks that spoil 1 year after and then running up mouth about it. Mr. President, we're going to have a tough 4 weeks ahead with rainfall. We don't have time for the political nonsense when we need to be making sure that people get water and that there's oversight in things like the trucking process to make sure that no rogue elements creep into a solid national program, Mr. President. The misinformation must stop. I thank you, Mr. President.
I've been charged by the opposition to respond to the... No.
Senator
The
Brown.
opposition
Senator
spokesperson
Brown.
here will respond. So I've been designated to respond and to ask questions after. Yeah. Mr. President, the minister has spoken for 34 minutes in a statement by minister. To me, it seems abusive, but that's to me. It certainly can be agreed that it was discourteous not to have provided the opposition with a copy of the statement. But such is the nature of things. President, much of what my friend Minister Samuda has announced was announced 2 weeks ago in his appropriation bill debate, in which he spoke for an hour and a half. Much of what he has said, the Prime Minister spoke in the other place with a 22-page statement. Minister Floyd Green have spoken. Minister Local Government have spoken. I see on TV the people of St. Thomas, despite all the talks of government ministers, are still without water. I've seen the people, who is that talking? A neophyte? I've seen the people in Negril, including tourists, demonstrating for water. What is clear is that despite the propaganda, the promise of investment, the people not getting water. Mr. President, this morning at 7 o'clock, I'm WhatsApping a friend abroad, and I said to her, I'm going to the Senate today, but I may not be able to do so as someone who's bid. Because in the Portmore pipes, the water was extremely low and not coming in the shower. A friend of mine who lives in Angels, and I had that conversation, and I told him, boy, I'm going to the Senate, but water pressure low. Him said, I don't even know water in my yard. So the experience, despite, you call him, it's Gary, call him. Despite the propaganda, despite the so-called information, despite the announce and re-announce and re-announce investment, the reality of the people is no water. But none said it better than your own Prime Minister, who in a post-mortem of the February 26th local government election said one of the biggest problems everywhere him go was water. Water. So clearly, Minister Samuda, what needs to be done is to get the water to the people and stop announcing, re-announcing projects. When you get the water to the people, then the 52% who voted for change will give you an ease up. But until then, what the people are feeling is an illusion. Every time you come with this map, and you see all of the that, I would think there's no water problem. But I want to thank Ian Ailes, the opposition spokesperson on water, for provoking another long speech from you. The answer, Mr. President, as I close, is not long speeches. It's delivering the water. A friend of mine in a Caribbean country once said, Lamy, my instructions to the government was stop announcing projects. What we wanted to do is announce the completion of projects. So, Senator Samuda, groundbreaking is not providing the water. When you put the water in and the people in Myersville get the water, then we can talk. When I in Portmore do have to send abroad and say, no water not there today. By the way, Senator Gill, the pressure came back up and I got a shower. A shower. Yeah. In the bathroom. Point I'm making, my friend, Mr. Samuda, get the water to the people. Stop announcing, re-announcing. When you do that, we will applaud you. For now, my friend, all you're doing is just spreading propaganda. May it please you, Mr. President.
Minister, no. You have a question? You have a question?
Mr. President, the minister said in his statement that it would take about 400 million to provide water to the Redberry community.
No, he never said so.
For roads. And then he made reference to some historical fraud. He made reference to some historical fraud that they...
Senator, I don't have the statement either, but I remember he said 400 million. Anyway, him there can clarify.
Yes, for the Redberry Road, I think it was related to the Redberry community. So it was road or water. To roads. Forest Redberry. Right, and he made some reference to a historical fraud at Manchester Municipal Corporation, which by the court records was nowhere near 400 million. But is he aware that the tax administration of Jamaica has paid more than that 400 million for an unoccupied building in Mandeville? And maybe that can he say whether that continuing 4 million a month could be diverted, that wasted money could be diverted to providing the road and water to the citizens of Redberry? Question one.
So you're not answering that because that question not related to nothing at all. Go on,
But
Senator.
he raised it. It related. He raised it. He spoke about the 400 million.
All right, go on. Next question. Next question. Come.
The minister made reference to the porous Redberry Road being a municipal road and the fact that the Manchester Municipal Corporation is controlled by the opposition. But is he aware that for the last 8 years, the councillor for the poorest division is a JLP councillor? And I'm sure 8 years is more than sufficient time for attention to be paid to that road. So if he's going to talk about responsibility, stop blaming other people. Stop blaming other people. For the last 8 years, that municipal road has been represented by the Jamaica Labour Party councillor. But, you know, what was most disturbing in the minister's statement is that his suggestion that the people of Redberry, or many people in Redberry, or let me put it this way, let me ask it as a question. Minister, you are suggesting that because of the high level of theft in the Redberry community, which you have just said, that the people of Redberry don't deserve water, and that is why they have not received water? Because if that is what the minister is suggesting, the residents of Redberry will soon have a chance to respond to you when time comes.
Mr. President, there is very little to respond to in both the response to my statement and the question. The point, however, sure.
No, so hold on a minute. Senator, It's a question for the minister. You want to wait or you want to answer the other one? No, you tell me. Senator Crawford, I recognize you from a seat other than your own. You seem to be promoting yourself. You're taking time and move up this side.
I move back this time, sir, because I know what's happening. Mr. President, I think we're in our third year of drought circumstances intermittently. And while it is very important for us to have conversations about how households receive water, there's also another aspect of our society, farming, that is dependent on water, in particular rainfall in some cases, but also on potable water for the poultry industry that is highly dependent on clean, fresh water, but is also a great subsidizer of our person's existence. A lot of people earn a living from having some form of chicken, both from the egg side and the poultry side. Our animal farms as well, which have been dependent on grass, have had to make great investment in bag feed due to the longer period of time grass takes to replenish itself, and on even hay. Some areas in St. Catherine have evolved as a hay producer because St. Catherine, as the minister highlighted, has maintained some rainfall. To that extent, is there a program that is in place for wells, for farms, to invest in wells, for example? A simple example, 20,000 layer birds will consume over 2,000 gallons a day of water, and will stop laying for 3 days if they don't get water one day. No, for 3 days. For 3 days. 20,000 will consume 2,000 gallons a day. So even when you have intermittent 3 days or 3 days on 3 days off, the farmer would then have to find both storage and access to 6,000 gallons for the day. Our wells in Jamaica, we're having the conversation, is very expensive, but is there any program for farmers to invest in that, because the uncertainty of rainfall, and in this case also the uncertainty of supply from the bird side, but also from the animal side, as cause for that concern. So most times the conversation is around household water, and so I'm hoping the next presentation will also include right. So but the farm water.
Thank you very much. So the minister is being invited to give us a presentation next week, perhaps on water as it relates to the farming.
So thank you, President. And 1 out of 3, I suppose, not bad for a question. But I'll start with the last intervention first. No, you responded, but I will respond to your response shortly. Related to the agricultural water first, because that's actually a genuine question. The Water Resources Master Plan table at the end of last year, I think, speaks to quite a bit of where well access is available and where likely to be granted. So I'd encourage anyone who is a holder of land looking at agricultural investment to look at that plan. We'd also bring your attention to the rainwater harvesting guidelines for planning that were tabled also at the same time towards the end of last year. because that also speaks to how rainwater harvesting should be used in agriculture and how to do it properly. Because as you've seen, even though we may have the same amount of rainfall for the year, you may get it in 2 hours and the runoff is not significant enough to recharge the aquifers. So yes, we do acknowledge and we are particularly concerned of the impact on our farmers, and that is why, as mentioned by Senator Brown, Minister Green have given a separate statement on the intervention being made by RADA and indeed the NIC. But it would be remiss of me to not note that you are midway in construction in the Essex Valley project in St. Elizabeth, which is some $50 million US, and that in the budget book there is $750 million for the investment in the Pedro Plains irrigation scheme, a project that has been on the books for 50 years and not executed. So expect the mapping and the engineering to be complete this year, allowing for construction next year. On that note, I transition into response to the response around the number of projects. As I could, if you would like me to, I could share with you the map of projects where people have benefited. 300,000 of them have benefited from the increase in water supply. What's that, sorry? You would know. The ultimate completion of these investments will move Jamaica to its Vision 2030 goal of potable water and sanitation for all. The people have a right to know how their money is being spent, and it is why we're not shy about updating the nation on our infrastructure projects. And there are many persons right across the length and breadth of the country who are already benefiting from increased water access and water resilience. So the final point wasn't quite a question. My criticism was not of the people of Red Bear, it was of you. Because as former chairman of the Water Commission, there is no project in South Manchester that you would have approved to give the people of South Manchester water when you had the chance so to do. And my criticism of you is, as a former Minister of National Security, not discouraging the breaking of the law in blocking the road, Mr. President. So ultimately, I want to be very clear. Very clear, Mr. President. People of Red Bear deserve water, and it is this administration that is going to give it to them. Because when that administration had the chance, they did no such thing.
Minister.
Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today. I want to take the opportunity to thank Minister Samuda for his detailed presentation and complete with visual graphics to help in our understanding of the significant work at play to ensure that the water woes of the people of Jamaica are dealt with efficiently and effectively. I want to thank him for his work in this regard. On that note, Mr. President, I ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Thank you very much. Just before we go, I had the privilege of sitting in the chamber during the transition from Mrs. Cook to Mrs. Curtis, and now from Ms. Curtis to Ms. Lowe. And I just want to thank the team that Ms. Lowe has selected to sit with her today. I think that we were all impressed by their quiet capacity. Ms. Brandon, who is sitting as the assistant deputy clerk, and Ms. Newman, who is sitting as the assistant clerk. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I know that, and the reason why I mention it, because I know that sometimes the change is a bit awe-inspiring in the right use of that word. So thank you very much, Ms. Lowe, and thank you very much. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? This honorable chamber now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.